The reason I'm inviting you here to this little conversation is that we're going to have a very important election in September. It's going to be, I would say, of historic importance, actually.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to sort of pick your guys' brains on that matter. What your thoughts are, if there's anything you're worried about, if there's anything you're hoping for. Your thoughts on the matter. I can start with asking you, Colin.
I'm going to say something that might be a bit controversial, but I hope in this election that the Sweden Democrats gets about as many votes as they get in the polls right now, about 25% or so. And I hope that Alternative for Sweden at least gets 1%, so that they have a better momentum for the next election. And I hope that the Sweden Democrats stays out of any government in the upcoming term, because I think that we're going to see some serious crashing of the economy in the next 4 years, and I don't want them to be associated with that depression.
Yeah. Ape?
Well, I think it's basically the same, but my hope for this election, besides the results for the Sweden Democrats, is I want to see Swedish social democracy to collapse. I want to see the same thing in Sweden happen as it happened in the Netherlands and in Germany and in France. Social democracy and social democrats have used their platform, and it has not worked. It has just led to what we see in Europe today. So
would you
I despise it.
Would you say that when it comes to Swedish Social Democrats, I actually try to give them a bit of a break, because if we go back in history, like way back, we're talking 1930s, somewhere around there, it was insanely different, the party. I mean, you had people in the party who just considered it to be theft if you wasted taxes.
Yeah.
And I mean, today it's just a complete. It's just a playground. They just screw around with people's monies like it's they know that the money just keeps coming in, so they don't have any respect for other people's money they pay in taxes to just fuck around with it. It really irritates me, because it's our government is so spoiled when it comes to money.
It's the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with my mother about this, because she's been sort of a hardcore social democrat basically since she could vote, but she's also seen this change where it's just such a wasteful party today.
Yeah, it is. Well, my problem with social democracy is that it's ideologically infested. You can't. Well, how should I put this? Looking on the Swedish governmental model, it is ripe for ideological infestation. You don't have a checks and balances system. So if the Social Democrats, if they say, for example, if they had 51% of the mandates in our government, they could issue anything they wanted, basically, because they could appoint judges, they could control their justice system, they could do anything they wanted. And what we need is a checks and balances, and we're never going to get that in a social democratic system, unfortunately, because they don't want it.
Yeah, I agree, because that's something I moan occasionally about in my videos, is that it's one of the biggest problems I have with, I don't know if I'd describe it as Swedish culture, but in a way, it is a part of Swedish culture, and that is our love for big government.
Yeah.
And that's one of the few things that irritates me with this country and the people living here. Not everybody, but a very big group of people have this blind faith in big government. And that's one of the reasons I think that we ended up with this problem, especially when it comes to immigration. That people assume that those in power know what the hell they're doing. And that was the same mistake they did in France and Germany, definitely in the UK. I mean, it's just madness over there right now. They're sort of racing us to the bottom at the moment.
Yep.
So, yeah. So that's, I completely agree there that is one of the problems we do. The system we have, it's very difficult to keep politicians accountable because they're, it's near impossible. I mean, we've seen that people who've done things, especially, you know, with Transportstyrelsen. I mean, those people should be behind bars, some of them. Basically. And instead they got rewarded with very cushy, well-paid jobs. It's impossible to keep people accountable.
Yeah, we had a system for that before, but I don't know when we got rid of that.
Somewhere in the 70s, I think.
Tjänstemannaansvar. Sorry, I can't translate it. But basically,
accountability for
bureaucrats. But we don't have that anymore. But I think that what you're talking about with the trust in government, I think that's basically just, you know, we had a high trust society, and for those of us who has not really woken up to the new country that we live in, they still have high trust, especially for governments, because, well, it's their government, isn't it? It's supposed to be anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to sort of be talking down to people either, because it's not like every single citizen in this country has blind faith in big government. But a lot of people that are, especially older people, they still believe in that. They have high trust in government because their trust in government used to be respected to a completely different degree than it is today. I would say that people in our government they have grown increasingly cynical in later years, where they, especially if you look at the press, for instance, who are pro-government, it sort of seeps in there a little bit, because you see that the press have they're shit at hiding it. They have a clear contempt for the people, basically. And I think that is something that drips down from the political elite, that I do not think it's a lot of people that are in politics today that are up on the top, who, if you would put their salaries like on the same salary as a teacher, I don't think any of those guys would still be politicians. They don't have any type of patriotism. I don't think that they would be willing to sacrifice, stop being a career politician and becoming sort of a civil servant in a real sense. I don't think that a majority of them would want to do that, because they're not patriots. Deep down, they don't really give a shit.
No, but that basically shows the progress, or how much the EU has achieved over the last 30 odd years, is that at least in the top layers of our society, there are people who don't really see themselves as Swedish. I mean, Swedish citizens first hand, and then European citizens second hand. They regard themselves either as European citizens or world citizens. And this goes through all of society, which, in my opinion, is a net negative. Because I believe in a nation state.
Yeah, that's definitely a negative. But I don't think that it is as prevalent as you might think when you read the newspapers and so on. If you talk to the man on the street, he's not of that persuasion at all.
No, it's more common in the higher social strata, of course.
Yeah, they want to keep doors open. I mean, if you look at this is embarrassing. I made a video about when I was talking about her. I forgot her name. Disgusting woman. The woman who ordered this pamphlet to be printed about child marriage. What is her name?
I don't remember, actually.
I think Anne something. I don't remember her last name, but anyway, this idiot, she basically asked to have that pamphlet be printed. And then when the shit hit the fan, she threw the organization who had printed the pamphlet, on her orders, she threw all of those guys under the bus and blamed them for, you know, well, the pamphlet was messed up. It was, I mean, that I had nothing to do with that. And then she got a new, really fancy job after she left her position at, I think, UN Women. You know, as
that's a shock.
Yeah, exactly. And my immediate thoughts was like, this woman should have nothing to do with protecting women.
No, because, she should be expunged.
Yeah, I mean, she's cancer. She shouldn't, especially not in such a branch of the UN. Mm-hmm. But so that's why I think that it's true that they don't view themselves primarily as Swedes who fight for Sweden. I think that they want to keep doors open.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for the politicians, yes, they do not view themselves as Swedish. Basically, they don't believe that there is such a thing. So how can they be Swedish then? At the same time, everybody is fucking Swedish nowadays. So
yeah, they've watered down the concept to a degree that is insane. I mean, if you look at let's take, I don't know, what should we take? If you take the French, which is actually a bit risky for me to bring up because the French have been insane when it comes to immigration and multiculturalism as well. But, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a French citizen who would agree that a person who doesn't even speak French is French. Well, in Sweden, you can find someone, say, who says that, like someone from Somalia or Eritrea or whatever that can't speak Swedish, they would say that they're still Swedes.
Yeah, new Swedes.
Yeah, exactly. New Swedes. Yeah. You only find that stuff really in maybe some people in England, but I think that's even a stretch there. I think that's almost unique to Sweden, where you place such low value on assimilation.
Yeah.
That it just, your culture basically needs to disappear, because otherwise it doesn't work at all. I mean, it doesn't work anyway, but you know, you see my point.
Yeah. Do we even have a culture? We have been told for the last 20 odd years that we don't.
Yeah, and it's the easiest argument against that is that if we don't have a culture, how come we have clashes?
Yep.
Like if we were just an empty void, then we would just all start acting like Muslims, pretty much, because that's usually where you find the cultural clashes, because a lot of these cultures and the religion are just completely intertwined with it. Where culture and religion is basically the same thing.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah, if we didn't have a culture, we wouldn't have a problem. But we do have a very, very obvious and a very strong and clear culture, which is the part that obviously pisses, people like us off. Because it's obvious that we have a culture, and it's a culture we should be very proud of and defend. But people, for some reason, they don't seem to be interested. And I don't really understand why.
I think it comes with the lack of... Oh, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, but I don't want integration, and I don't want assimilation either. I want Sweden for the Swedish people, basically.
Yeah.
Maybe I've gotten a bit, radical lately, but that's how I view it.
I think every Swedish citizen has found themselves to become a little bit, at least, more radicalized in the past couple of years. Yeah. The important part is that you analyze why you are becoming radicalized, because it's inevitable in a climate like this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we just look at it clearly, it's obviously an act of self-defense, and there's nothing wrong in admitting that. It is. That's why I feel. It's why I was way more tolerant a couple of years ago, or actually several years ago, but. But I mean, it is an act, I think, in a way, an act of self-defense. That if you look, for instance, when it comes to politics, usually men vote more to the right than women do. And the reason that men do this is because they're more concerned with with protecting their families. Not to say that women don't that they don't give a shit about their families, but they're most often more interested in when it comes to schools and when it comes to the, being able to have someone take care of the children and stuff like that. But men usually vote more conservative. And if you look at the Sweden Democrats, I mean, the amount of men who are voting for the party is just crazy. I mean, I think the latest numbers I saw from the amount of women who voted for the Sweden Democrats, I think this was 2014. Then you had 2% of women, and I mean the rest of Sweden Democrat voters. I mean 2% of the women, and the rest were men. So it's evened out more now, probably because all of these women have seen how dangerous Sweden has become.
Yeah.
So when you have more female voters now who vote for them, but men have been voting for the Sweden Democrats all of this time because men are more concerned with law and order. They're more concerned with keeping their families safe in a more physical sense. And that's also why you get the people in the Sweden Democrats who are so, aggressive with defending their culture, because it is an act of self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, countries who don't defend their culture have a very weak cultural identity. They just become basically gobbled up by groups of people who have a much stronger identity. I mean, history tells us that. So
yeah, that's true. We've seen numerous examples over the course of the recorded history, at least, where this has happened. But I mean, even so, I think that what is happening now is inevitable, because you have had an multinational political organization telling all of its member states that you are now not citizens of your member countries, you are now citizens of our supranational entity, if call it that, the European Union. And it's scary to me to see that for 250 odd years, maybe, or 200 years, the nation state has been the single focus in the West, the primary idea that made nations progress forward, right? And then comes the EU, because then we see the wars, and some leading people see nationalism as the cause of all the wars in the 20th century. And it's understandable that they saw it this way, because they had just come out to majorly devastating wars. And now we're seeing, reaping the consequences of their ideas. So if we raise the national identity, it's going to be fine, because national identity was the cause of the two world wars. But it is never that simple.
Well, about the wars, the Second World War was just a continuation of the first one. And
yes.
And as far as I have seen, the First World War was a consequence of a bit too little nationalism.
It was basically imperialism.
Yeah, which is the opposite of nationalism.
Mm-hmm. But they saw it as the root cause of the wars. And I can understand it, because during the Second World War, nationalism took the forefront. Like the German people, things like that. So I can understand why they reason that way, but I do not agree with them. It's way more complex than just saying nationalism is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's when it comes down to it, it's I'd say to a large part why we're having the problems that we're having today is that in the end the nationalism lost the Second World War and communism won.
Collectivism,
a form of collectivism won. If you have in Sweden, for instance, you see journalists write these opinion pieces. They use nationalism interchangeable with Nazism.
Yep.
It's insane. I mean, if you look at the actual definition of the word, Gandhi was a nationalist. He wanted to take back the means of production from the textile industry from the British and nationalize the profits. And if you take who do you have? Mossadegh, for instance. That's also a good example. He was a nationalist. He wanted to nationalize the oil in order to help his own people. So they use nationalist as it means Nazi. And that is a relic from the Second World War. And I don't know how to get rid of that. That's that's a problem we have in Sweden, that the word is so badly stained. It's like feminism, pretty much. Feminism only has negative connotations for most people today.
Yeah, but I think I see that is sort of shifting. The weight of those words is just falling like a stone. People don't really care as much about being called racists or Nazis or whatever nowadays.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, it's it only works so far. You can only that's the problem. If you overuse words, they lose meaning. So that's why you should never throw those words around, because they shouldn't lose meaning. It's a horrible thing if you're genuinely a racist.
So it depends on what you mean by racist, but
yeah, I'm talking about, I don't know, beating up a black person and calling him the N-word and curb stomping him because he's black.
Okay, that's a bad thing.
That's where I draw the line.
Yeah.
It's like skin color is an arbitrary trait. You can't judge people for something they had no choice in becoming.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you can't judge an individual based on it, but there are differences between different ethnic groups.
Of course, there are differences, but you can't judge the whole group because there are differences.
It depends on what you mean by judge.
Well, say for example, if we are talking about Somalians, right? I know that there is a statistically, a general IQ difference between black people and white people. But that's the same with Asians and things like that. But can I judge all the Somalians and say that they are subhuman or less than human because the general IQ levels are low in the black population? No, I don't think I can do that.
No, of course not. But
so that's what I mean by judging.
Okay. Yeah. So if that is what you mean by judging, then we can't judge them. But there is some middle ground between the extremes here. Because you and I realize that there are differences doesn't mean that we have to hate them or think that we are
precisely.
I don't know, Übermensch.
Yeah.
But it also means that we have to make a call here. Can we import millions of people from those countries and put them into our high-tech society and expect them to function here? Well, no, we cannot.
No, not to 100%. No, definitely not. There's just too many differences in the society they come from and the society here.
The evidence shows us that already. It's like it's not even a question anymore. We know that we can't.
Yeah.
So it comes down to charity, basically. It's just this weird type of, like, we're going to bring a person here who is never going to be able to contribute on any sort of meaningful level, which then leaves us with charity. Is that what we're doing? The whole thing is bizarre to me. Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is even worse, in my opinion. Private charity, I have no problem at all with private charity, but state charity, for every year that's gone since 2015, I have become more and more of an opponent towards the welfare state. It doesn't work. There's no possible way to make it work.
No, that would be to go back and get like real old school social democrat type of politics where it is definitely like heavily frowned upon to waste people's money in a way that doesn't exist today. Then you could fix it, but I agree that the welfare state in its current form is impossible to have if you're also going to have immigration of people who can't contribute to it, because that's basically the biggest problem that we constantly end up in. How do we provide for people who can't help to contribute?
It's not, yeah, I understand what you mean, but it's not just the people coming here, right? Because if you look at the two laws, like SOL, the social welfare law, and LSS, the law of support and service, basically. You look at those two laws, and you look at the costs of those two laws for the Swedish people, the individuals living in Sweden. The costs have been through the roof ever since they implemented these laws. So sure, it's sustainable to a certain degree, but the costs are enormous. I mean, just imagine, say, for example, you throw someone in a what's it called? Tvångsvård. Mandatory care, basically, where you force them to go to a rehab center or whatever. Yeah. You pay for 6 months at that rehab center. You pay close to 3, if not even 4 million crowns. And that is insane amount of money to just throw away. And most people actually going to these rehab centers don't have the will to stop using drugs or whatever it is that they do. So they just come back and start using again, and then you send them away again. I know of several cases in my commune that this has happened like tens, if not 15, 20 times for some people.
Yeah, no, it's such a problem, and it's one of these things, to go back to talking about the election here. We sort of had a bit... yeah, exactly. But a lot of people are very upset about how old people are currently being treated in Sweden. And I think that really comes back to what I would view as a failure of the welfare state. That's pretty much, in my view, the biggest failure. Because you have people who have been paying into the system their entire lives. And then when they're pretty much at death's door, they get treated like garbage, pretty much. And a lot of people, I think, are going to vote for the Sweden Democrats in order to fix that, which is insane in my view, because if you feel like it's a single party that gives a shit about old people, except the Christian Democrats, they claim to do that as well, but then it's something that is seriously screwed up in the country. I mean, the obvious choice should be Social Democrats, because they constantly meander on about the welfare state and how the welfare system should leave nobody behind. But instead, you have a social conservative party with a heavy nationalist streak, who pretty much out of an act of patriotism get pissed off about how people are getting treated. It's a kind of bizarre situation. Do you think that's going to play a big role in the election? Just the treatment of the elderly. I mean, it's got to be a lot of people who have family members who are...
I think so. Yeah. If you see, the main thing is that people need to understand is that we all act according to self-interest, right? Yeah. So when I, as Gemene Svensson, basically the ordinary dude, when I see my everyday life, so to speak, affected by the politicians' decisions to take people into our country, of course I'm going to vote for a party that stops this from happening. So I think the results for the Sweden Democrats might surprise us. Even I think they might even be able to get over 25%.
I think this is kind of interesting, actually, because me and my wife had a conversation about this, and she actually is on your side when it comes to this, because I thought that it was way too optimistic to think that they would come. You know, I said, okay, maybe 20%. You know, I thought they were going to sail in on the strong number 2, becoming the second biggest party. But she actually thought that they had a shot at winning. And
I'm not excluding anything.
No, that's the thing. I actually think as well that they might have a shot at winning. It depends, you know. You often talk about the silent majority. And I think that we definitely have that in Sweden. I think we got a huge silent majority. I mean, if you talk to people, it's very few of them. If you just have an everyday conversation with somebody and you ask them as something as harmless as which party do you like, Which party's ideas do you like? A majority are never going to admit that that is the Sweden Democrats. They're going to give you some half-assed answer about like, yeah, I care about these and these issues, and so I'm guessing that we have a really big group of people who might come out to vote. The problem is that I'm worried about is that men, statistically, we are shit at voting compared to women. Women basically double us when it comes to voting.
Like turnout rates, you mean?
Yeah, we're shit at voting, and women. This blows my mind. I'm gonna try to not sound like some misogynist pig here, but I do not understand Sweden's women right now, the majority of them, because the women who are voting, they're voting for parties who are going to definitely make sure that dangerous people get into the country. The group of people who are the absolutely most dangerous for women. Let's just cut the shit. It's self-destructive at this point to be a woman and to vote for like the left party or the Green Party.
Yeah, or the feminists or whatever.
Yeah, or the feminists. That just blows my mind. It's crazy.
I think it's if we're talking generally, right? Women are more dictated by their emotions, or they let their emotions dictate their behavior in a greater extent than in men. Yeah. So I think it has
statistically we're speaking in general terms here. So
of course there are exceptions.
Yeah.
But men tend to be more pragmatic, and that's why you said like more men vote Sweden Democrats, because they see a problem. They need to vote for someone who fixed that problem or promises to fix that problem.
Yeah.
So they vote for SD. Instead, women might be higher tendency to vote for something that makes them feel as if they had made some good decision or feel good because they have helped someone or something like that.
Yeah, but they haven't helped themselves.
No.
And I understand why some people can view that as being noble, that they focus on someone else. But when it comes to some of these people that we've been taking in, there's a reason that their home countries don't want to take them back, and that is that they're criminals.
Yeah.
And we've been taking in a lot of those people, and it just blows my mind why such a large group of this refugee welcome crowd are women. Because it's seriously dangerous for women. Some of these people are coming in.
And we don't know the people coming in. That's the first thing.
Oh yeah, that's true. So I shouldn't assume things because we have no idea who they are. So some of them might be these little saints who are not going to do anything bad. But the people who do something bad, we usually find out later that they've left their home countries. I mean, if you take Anis Amri, the guy behind running over all the people at this Christmas market in Germany, he was wanted for, I think, auto theft and vandalism and aggravated assault and shit. So he was really just a straight up criminal and had no reason whatsoever to be in Germany, and he'd been using fake names, fake addresses, fake everything. And I mean, it's naive to think that guy is unique in any way.
I think that we shouldn't focus solely on the people who are doing deeds that are, a big problem. We shouldn't focus only on the criminals and on the terrorists and so on, because I don't think that we can get rid of that problem but by getting rid of just those people. Because when you have diasporas in a country, those kind of elements will just spawn there. We will never get rid of that problem until we get rid of the diasporas. And we cannot get rid of the diasporas without getting rid of those people and sending them back, because we cannot integrate them, we cannot assimilate them, because that is just how the human animal works.
Yeah.
You're talking about conclaves of, say, for example, where the Swedish justice system do not reach, or diasporas, Yeah, that's definitely, looking at Britain, that is definitely a problem. Like separate justice systems and Sharia courts, and it's just that we don't want that here.
Jesus Christ, you know, in England, they have, it just drives me insane. I mean, England, they're really at a very good level here where they're about to outcuck us when it comes to retarded behavior, because they have these things in England that are called religious advice boards. So people go to these boards to get religious advice about their Muslim faith. Yeah. But they go there when it comes to divorce, when it comes to splitting up, you know, property between family members and everything. But it's such a shifty, sneaky behavior that like it's a religious advice board. I mean, get the fuck out of here! It's a Sharia court. Yeah,
that's the thing. It sounds harmless.
Yeah, and there's hundreds of them.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not like they have one or two in some bigger cities or whatever. It's hundreds of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and I mean, I love this argument because I've told people that we should focus resources more on in the lands that are having the wars or having the problems and everything, so we don't have to get refugees here to start with. But then people say, well, we shouldn't start with nation building because nation building never works. What the hell what the hell are we doing in Sweden right now? We're nation building in Sweden. We have a little Mozambique. I mean, it's just laugh worthy. Like, we shouldn't get involved in nation building. We have these enclaves that are like little countries. It's just absurd.
It is.
So I mean, people obviously want to vote for a party that wants to sort of get rid of that, because that's the part that really annoys me as well, that the majority of the people who live in like Rinkeby, for instance, that are ethnic Swedes, they lived there before we started with this mass migration. So it's really old people. And they're living in these areas that have become very, very dangerous. And that pisses me off a lot as well, that they simply, they haven't had the possibility, or maybe they don't even want to, because they just love, you know, what used to be their home, you know. But so you have a lot of older people that are living in these areas that are like heavily criminalized.
And then they're often pensioners, and they don't have any good income, and they don't have the option to leave the areas sometimes.
Yeah, they got no, what's it called, economic mobility.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why we have all these cases where it's like elderly people, people breaking into their homes and stealing their gold watches and shit. I mean, it's because you have older people that are living in these areas as well. And I mean, these things, they end up in the news. And then, I mean, stuff like that really is like candy for Sweden Democrats.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out, because I think we have a really big silent majority, actually. I'm not sure we're going to have like a Trump-style victory.
No, maybe not, no. But I think it's going to overwhelm many people.
Yeah. No, it will, but I don't think that the Sweden Democrats actually can fix anything, even if they had the majority.
No,
I don't think they have the right type of policies. They are talking about open Swedishness and whatnot. They are talking about integration, about assimilation, and they are not talking a whole lot about sending those people home again in a realistic and humane manner, of course. So I don't think that they could fix the problems, even if they got free reins to do what they are, at least what they're saying that they're going to do. And they won't solve the problem, so they won't actually get my vote this election.
No,
They might not to. They might not to. Keep going.
No, it's just the problem with the Sweden Democrats, in my view, is that they practice. I describe myself as a civic nationalist. I think that nationalism and belonging to a nation is very much defined by the ideals and the values that you hold. That's why I think there's people who have on paper that they're citizens, but then go down and butcher people in Syria. I do not consider them to be Swedish. No. I think they're tourists with a very fancy paper. But the Sweden Democrats, they have actually, on some points, they have the worst parts of civic nationalism, that I think that they're too liberal when it comes to the definition of what it actually means to be a Swede. And people say like, well, they're like complete Nazis on that. I don't think they're liberal at all, but they kind of are in a way. I mean, that's why people make fun of them sometimes, because it sounds like they basically say, yeah, as long as you, I don't know, eat surströmming or whatever, or like knäckebröd or what have you, as long as you do these different points in this, it's almost like you could write a manual for becoming a Swede. And they would hand them out on the mail, and then you would just check off the boxes, and then you would be Swedish. So that's why people sort of have been asking them, well, but okay, who defines what it means to be Swedish? But it's actually very easy to define what it means to be Swedish. But I think that the Sweden Democrats, they usually miss the mark quite with a lot. They focus on kind of stupid things with Swedishness.
Yeah.
Which actually is kind of weird, because Alternativ för Sverige, which I thought we could talk a little bit about, I think they are closer to the type of nationalism I'm talking about. But I don't know, I get sort of a bit of a stench of ethno-nationalism from those guys.
Yeah, that's why I like them.
But I mean, the problem with that, the biggest problem I have with ethno-nationalism is that it requires massive government. You have to have, in order to be able to in any way preserve the native sort of ethnicity of your nation, somebody is going to have to regulate that.
Oh, it depends on what scale we're talking about, of course. To me, it doesn't mean that we have to go, full-blown SS style type of, cleansing. No, but a small trickle of people from other countries coming in, that's not a problem. I mean, we've had immigration to this country since forever, but that immigration level has never been higher than 1% of the total population being born outside of the country. And that's just fine. That's natural. That's a natural level of immigration. But the core thing with ethno-nationalism is that a Swedish person is a Swedish ethnic person. It's the ethnicity that makes you Swedish, and that's what gives you right to be in the country, basically. And of course, if you find love in some other country while you're there working or on holiday or something, it's not a problem. The problem would be, as you say, if you bring in 300,000 Thai women, that would be a problem.
Yeah, or Afghan boy toys,
Yeah,
or toy boys. Yeah.
So preserving the race and whatnot, I mean, it depends on what level you put it on. I'm not for this grand idea of building this new Euro-Asian Negroid that the founders of the European Union were talking about.
But let me ask you something, Colin. When it comes to AFS, Alternative for Sweden, do you think that they would follow that picture you painted up if we have the same kind of government we have today with no checks and balances? Because I can see that if they were to get, say, for example, a majority or a coalition or whatever, we would have the same kind of behavior from them as from the Social Democrats and the Green parties today. They create authorities and they just rampant ideological abuse.
Yeah, I'm all for some constitution. I think we need a constitution, and I think that we need checks and balances. Yeah, the checks and balances that we have today, the only one that we do have is that we do not have only two parties to vote for. The only checks and balances that we have is that to get anything through the government or through the parliament, we need to form coalitions between different parties. That's the only checks and balances that we have. And I do not think that AFS can get more than 50%.
Like, the fundamental problem I have with them is that it feels like big state oppression of the individual. Either way you turn it, because maintaining an ethno-national nationalist state, it's very difficult. It feels like it's going to be a lot of micromanagement and a lot of sort of authoritarian identity politics being practiced against individuals by a gigantic government.
That's what I feel as well. But I mean, I can see AFS being a moderating influence on the radical left.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm hoping for. That they become a pretty small party, but that they still have something. Because I mean, I'm all for more nationalism in Swedish politics. I think that's great. You know, I just have a very hard time with sort of seeing how any form of grand utopian idea about an ethno-state would turn out. And the thing is, you know, I'm not going to, maybe I'm just talking shit here, because I have actually not heard them specifically say that they want an ethno-state, but it kind of sounds like it, especially when they talk about these sending people back to their home countries. It sounds... I've been trying to get a straight response from them how they're actually planning on to do something like that, because they've pretty much been saying, well, we're going to incentivize them to leave, and I've had a hard time figuring out if that means that includes paying them money to move away. But
if I ever understand it correctly, yeah, paying them in part, not always, but also making the legislation, so to speak, not harder per se, but less incentives for them to come here and use the welfare state, basically. So harder to get grants, harder to get subsidies and things like that.
But the problem that I actually asked one of the guys, I think his name is All, something All.
Yeah,
Mr. Jeff.
Yeah, Paul. Yeah, I actually asked him about that. That I said that if you pay people to sort of like if they're already in the country and you want to pay them to incentivize them to leave, isn't that just going to create sort of a hamster wheel where people get paid to piss off and then they use human traffickers to kind of sneak back into the country, and then they get paid to leave, and then it just keeps going like that?
Well, the paying part it comes in when we want Swedish citizens to leave. If you don't have a permit, we don't need to pay you to leave. We can just box in and send you. That's of course there's problems with that too. I mean, logistical problems with it, but you know, in principle.
Have you guys read about what Hungary are doing with their refugee crisis?
I
wasn't aware they had one. I just
they built these buffer zones, right?
Yeah, precisely. They built the fence around their country, and then they built the buffer zones like inside the Hungarian border, so that when they find illegals in their country, they could just dump them on the buffer zone, and then it's not technically a deportation because you're still in Hungary, but if you don't want to suffer the, so to speak, the bureaucratic process of becoming a citizen, then you're free to leave. Which is a fucking ingenious solution. I don't know if I agree to it 100%, but it's ingenious nonetheless.
Yeah, I like it. It's not possible for us to do it unless we want to send these people to... Yeah, unless we want to send them to Norway or Finland or something.
Malmö is a goddamn dumpster fire. Every time I hear something about that city, it's just another level of shit.
That's why you built a wall around it.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's the place is floating basically just because the rest of Sweden just keeps pumping money into it. It's crazy.
Isn't Malmö one of these cities where the majority of the men aged 14 to 44 is foreign?
That might be
Yeah,
true.
wouldn't surprise me at all. It's like certain ethnic groups in Malmö, they have like 80% unemployment.
Crazy.
It's insane, and I mean the women are pretty much on 100% because they have a culture where women don't work. So I mean it's the whole thing's and of course the city is run by social democrats.
Yeah, it's like Gothenburg. It's a nepotistic corruption
Yeah.
hole. It's crazy.
Yeah, my brother just moved there against my advice. I've lived in Gothenburg, and no. I just told him, why do you have to live there? And he said, well, my friends live there. And I said, well, your friends are retards. Why do you want to live there? And just as I thought, he moved down there, and I think it was a week later, they had a shooting a couple of blocks down from where he lives. Just to try to round it off a little bit here, because I think this is good. We do it sort of this way. We don't sort of talk like forever, because you can talk about Sweden forever, you know, currently anyway. So I'll just round it off by asking you if you're okay with it, you know, which party you're leaning on voting for this year.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm voting for AFS, I think.
Okay.
Yep. I'm voting for... Okay.
I just sort of wanted to ask why. Is that because... is it primarily because there are ideas about deportations, of sending people back?
Yeah, the repatriation aspects of their policies, that's the main issue, the only thing that can save this country at this point. And the AFS is the only party that actively talks about it. Sweden Democrats are supposed to have something written about that somewhere tucked away and hidden in a closet somewhere. But they don't talk about it. So I do not believe that they are going to push for those policies. So I'm voting for AFS.
I think you're right there.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if the Sweden Democrats put it on the table, and if they actually won, they might start talking about it. But I mean, it's never going to pass. I don't think they would pass such an idea. More or less, all of the other parties are going to sort of morally high horse and say, "Oh, that's terrible. That's such a disgusting act, and it's so inhumane." And they would never pass such a bill where they legalize the deportation of or not deportation, but what's it called?
Repatriation of areas.
I hope I'm wrong there, but it's just so incredibly like complete opposite to what we've been seeing for this entire time. It's according to them, it's a very radical idea.
Yeah, but it's much less radical than trying to integrate them, or even, and especially compared to trying to assimilate them, because that requires a huge government with a huge, micromanagement and use of force. That's much more radical.
Well, assimilation, yeah, maybe, but never mind that. We can keep going.
Okay. And what would you say?
My vote this year is going to SD, because they are the only party that, there are three parties mainly that voted against the European Weapons Directive, and that is the Centers, the Liberals, and SD. And the Liberals are fall Liberals, and Centerpartiet is basically, I don't trust them at all. They're nasty. I don't like Annie Lööf. So it's going to be SD. Stopgap measure is why I vote SD, because there are three issues right now that Sweden needs it needs it urgently, we can just say. And it's Swexit, because the European Union is sinking and we need to abandon ship. Individual liberty and the right to own weapons. Well, not maybe right, but they shouldn't make it harder to own weapons, because we have the best gun laws in Europe. And also stopgap measure for the immigration, because the situation in Sweden is untenable. So that's basically those three. And then I'm going to vote for Medborgerlig Samling or Citizens Union, like the next election.
But Medborgerlig Samling, aren't they pro-EU?
Yep. That's why I'm not voting for them this time. I'm hoping that's going to change, because I'm talking about it, and I'm a member in the party, so I'm trying to make them understand, at least the people I've talked with.
Yeah,
I'm seeing more and more EU skepticism in Sweden now.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at England, I mean, people were talking about the entire country was going to collapse, just like weeks after they said that they were. I mean, it's such a that's one of the main reasons. Like, I would say the main reason it's unthinkable for me to vote on Medborgerlig Samling right now. I can never vote for a party that is pro-EU.
Yeah.
Or not pro-EU, but pro-remaining in the EU.
Yeah.
All right. I guess I gotta, man up as well here. I'm planning on voting for the Sweden Democrats because at this point, it feels, I hate that expression, but a lot of people say, like, why do you vote for these smaller parties? You're wasting a vote. You should vote on the bigger party. But in this case, I think it's so important that they at least get into a strong second place as the second biggest party, and that they land there, that we don't get the moderates or some other shit.
Yeah.
So that's the way I feel about it. There's a lot of things in Sweden Democrat politics that I don't like, but we can't get rid of it right now. It's just got to focus on the highest amount of damage control possible in the shortest amount of time. So it's not really any love for the party. I'm just being sort of pragmatic about it.
That's why that's what you should do when you vote. You should be pragmatic.
Yeah.
You're never going to get a party that fits everything, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of the way I'm thinking. Okay, I'm thinking we can just round it off here. I think this was great. We should do this more often if you're up for it.
I'd want to do that because this was interesting.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's always fun to talk about politics.
Yeah, especially now because it's a complete shit show. This country right now, it's just a circus.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for your honesty as well. It's I know it's can be a little difficult to be honest on. We'll talk about these topics and talking about why you vote the way you do, and so yeah. We will definitely be in touch, and thank you, everybody who's been listening, and hope you enjoyed this.
Thanks for having us on, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was great. All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.